Bueno, un saludo, buenos días, buenas tardes. Yo prefiero decir hola, que es a prueba de toda zona horaria. Mi nombre es Ignacio Maroto, soy Provost y Academic Vice President de Westfield Business School. Tenemos en la sala ya a 171 personas y me cabe el enorme honor y placer de poder daros la bienvenida a esta sesión. Bienvenidos al inicio del bloque de Westfield, que siempre abrimos con un keynote, con una charla de interés de un ponente de primera fila. Hoy tendremos el privilegio de poder disfrutar de esta charla de Anne Michels, que nos va a hablar sobre el poder de aprender a cómo fallar rápido y pequeño, fail quick and small, relacionado con la implementación de inteligencia artificial. Para presentar a Anne Michels tenemos a Rafael de Cárdenas. Rafael es Chief of Innovation and Curriculum Content Development en Westfield y también Chief Academic Officer en Prisma. Rafael nos va a presentar a nuestra oradora que nos va a ofrecer este keynote de hoy. Adelante, Rafa.
Muchísimas gracias, Ignacio, y a todos. Un gusto estar con vosotros. No veo el icono, yo no lo veo, el icono de Globo del Mundo, pero me parece que lo tenemos, ¿verdad? Para la traducción simultánea. Si alguien del equipo me lo puede confirmar, yo no lo veo.
Sí.
Siguen
Sí,
sumándose
sí, está activo.
estudiantes. Fenomenal. ¿Dónde está? Porque yo no lo veo. Veo muchos signos de que lo veis. Bueno, pues adelante. Veo que sigue subiendo el número, 206, 207. Bueno, vamos a dar arranque para disfrutar de Anne el mayor tiempo posible. Paso al inglés. Los que queráis seguir la sesión en inglés no tenéis que hacer nada. Los que queráis pasar a español podéis buscar el icono de interpretación y si no en el chat alguien os podrá guiar si no lo encontráis. Hello everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Anne Michels, our speaker today, to be here with us. And just let me say briefly a few things about Anne, because I want for you to enjoy the time with her, which is amazing, as you will witness. Anne is a phenomenal woman and leader. She has been many years working at Microsoft in different roles, like global director for Microsoft Teams, many years, also CEO for Microsoft Austria. Lately, she's been CEO and vice president for Kyndryl Germany, and she's a very well known and with a fantastic reputation as a keynote speaker, expert in digital transformation, technology, growth, scalability, and actually artificial intelligence. So all the things that are paramount now that are really shaping our business and the mindset of business leaders like you are, Anne is an expert at, and also in leadership, of course, because it's their way to make all this happen together. Anne, truly an honor and a pleasure that you will be with us here, and really looking forward to your session. Thank you very much.
Pues muchísimas gracias por tus lindas palabras y hola a todos y bienvenidos a mi presentación de hoy. Es un gran placer para mí estar aquí con ustedes esta noche y aunque me encantaría dar la presentación en español, tengo que admitir que mi español es más como un español de la calle y como vamos a hablar de temas profesionales, creo que es mejor que cambie al inglés. Pero voy a intentar como entender sus preguntas también en español si no me funciona la interpretación. Lo veremos.
Tu español de la Universidad de La Laguna es muy bueno, Anne.
Sí, puedo decir que la Universidad de San Cristóbal de la Laguna en Tenerife, si no la conocen, es una muy buena universidad y Tenerife es una muy buena isla para vivir también. Así que... Vale, empezamos. So, good morning and good afternoon and good evening, everybody, and welcome to my session, Fail Fast, Adapt Faster, Reinventing Business in the Age of AI. I am very excited to be here with you tonight and to meet all of you. When I talked to Rafa a couple of weeks ago for the first time, and when he asked me if I wanted to do a presentation on AI and resilience, well, I didn't really have to think about it because AI, you all know that, is the topic right now, right? It is the one topic that we all need to think about. AI is not just the future, AI is here today. And we also know that AI is here to stay. And you as leaders, you just don't need to understand it, but you also need to be able to navigate it. And that also means for all of us, since it's such a new topic, that means for all of us stepping outside of our comfort zone, learning new things. And that also means failing at some of them and then learning from those failures. And that's exactly what we want to talk about today. So I won't spend much time on this slide because Rafa did a fantastic job introducing myself already. But just a couple of more words from my side. I've been working in the tech industry for over 17 years now. And in those 70 years, I had the opportunity to lead a lot of great teams and projects internationally. I'm originally from Germany. I'm from the Bonn-Cologne area. If you know Germany a little bit, it's like an hour and a half north of Frankfurt. And this is also where I went to school, where I did my master's degree. And then from there, I very quickly joined Microsoft, and I was first responsible for technical student marketing. Some of you might remember it was the era of Windows Phone, which was a great phone, by the way. If you had one, you will know there were multiple reasons why Microsoft failed with Windows Phone, but it was a fantastic device. But one problem that we had was that we didn't have enough apps in the marketplace. And that was exactly what our team focused on. How can we win technical students over to the Microsoft platform? And then how can we get them to write apps for Windows Phone? Then I was very quickly asked if I wanted to join Microsoft Corporation and move to Seattle in the US, which I said yes to. I had never been to Seattle, but you will see throughout this keynote that I'm a person, I jump on opportunities, and that was one of them that presented itself to myself. And so I moved to the US without ever having been in Seattle. The plan was to stay there for 1 or 2 years. Well, that ended up being 12 years in the end. You know how life sometimes kind of like makes its own decisions, but it was a great time for me because I had the opportunity to work on a lot of great international projects with worldwide impact, and specifically also, right, when you work at the corporation, at the headquarters of Microsoft, you just get to work with some of the brightest talents in the tech industry. And specifically in the last 5 years, I was able to take over the product marketing for the other great video platform that is out there called Microsoft Teams. And we were able, within those 5 years, we were able to grow the usage of Microsoft Teams from just a couple of hundred people to 280 million people at the end of those 5 years. Right? And when you just think about that, you work on a product and you're responsible for a product that is used by 280 million people worldwide. COVID did give us a little push as well, right? I won't kind of like omit that, but it was really a great kind of like opportunity for me to work on that. From there, I moved back to Europe. My husband is also from Germany. So at some point you need to ask yourself, where do you see yourself long-term? And we made the decision to move back to Europe to be closer to family. We have 2 kids. They're now 4 and 6. At that point, they were 2-month-old and 2 years. And we simply wanted them to grow up with their grandparents and their grandparents to get old with their kids, with our kids, right? Their grandchildren. So we moved back to Europe. And that meant for me leaving Microsoft Corporation. I then joined Microsoft Austria, became COO there. So basically moving from the strategic side of things and the business side of things over to the execution side of things. And then from Microsoft Austria, I left Microsoft after 17 years and joined Kyndryl as COO for Kyndryl Germany. And Kyndryl, if you haven't heard about Kyndryl, I won't blame you. It's actually a fairly new company. Kyndryl has only been around for 3 years, but it is one of the biggest IT services companies in the world with 60,000 employees. So you're probably asking yourself now, why have I never heard of Kyndryl? There are 2 reasons for that. On the one hand, Kyndryl got founded as a spin-off from IBM. That's why they have only been around for 3 years. But before that, they were part of IBM as their own organization. They were called GTS. And second, also, they focus on IT services for big corporations. So if you don't work in an IT department of like Deutsche Bank or Hapag-Lloyd, right, you will not have any touch points with Kyndryl. And that's why you will probably not, most of you have probably not heard of Kyndryl. I mentioned already, I have 2 daughters. We now live in the area of Cologne again. My husband, our 2 daughters, and our cat. And so I literally try every day to juggle life, right? Juggle work, juggle my 2 daughters. And sometimes it works better than others. Let's just put it like that. But now let's jump in. And I would like to actually start with a question. So who of you likes to be wrong? Who of you likes the feeling when you do something and it doesn't work? So who of you likes to fail? Anyone? No, right? Nobody. No one is raising their hand. Of course not. Nobody likes to fail. I don't like it either. Failing is hard. Failing is painful. And that is actually not surprising that we feel that way, because this is what we have been taught our whole life. Just think about it. Think about school, right? Can you remember? Let me take you back to like high school. Can you remember history class? I'm taking you a little bit down memory lane right now. Anyone here on the call who has ever failed a history exam? I'll raise my hand. So I was a fairly good student, but history was the one topic I was not very excited about, right? This was kind of like my weak spot, right? But I'm sure you can also think of another subject. I'm sure all of you have at least at some point failed an exam. And now put yourself back into that moment and think about, what did your parents, what did your teachers say in that moment? Did they say, "Oh, don't worry, this is good. You will learn from failing the exam. Failing this exam is actually a very important part, a very important step in your journey to success"? No, of course they didn't say that, right? Because that is simply not how our school systems work. In school, we are being taught every single day, and that is basically still the same. I have a daughter who's in school now, right? They teach you not to fail. But then, of course, you enter the workforce. And things all of a sudden change. Because all of a sudden, we are being told that failing is something good. We're being told that we have to embrace failing. We're even being told to fail, because we know that now, right? We know that failing is good. We know now that failing is important, because failing is the fastest way to learn. And we know that when we fail, we reflect on things and we gain important knowledge that we would not have been able to gain in a perfect scenario. And it is knowledge that we can use in the future, that we can build on top of, to then overcome a similar situation and to actually get to a better result. But in school, we are taught that failing is bad. And then at work, all of a sudden, right, it is essential to growth. So now the question, of course, is, how can you embrace failing if you have been taught your entire life that you should avoid it? That's not easy, right? Because how can you see failing as something positive, as something helpful, if you have learned that it is not? So how can you really see failure as a necessary path for growth and success? And most important, in those moments of failure, how can you be resilient? And how can you make sure that those unpleasant feelings that come with failure, we'll talk about that in a second, because yeah, failing is still no fun for none of us, right? But how can you make sure that those unpleasant feelings don't guide you and that you don't avoid failure? So for me, what has really helped me, and as I said, I was a good student. I didn't fail a lot of exams. So when I started working, I didn't really know the feeling of failure, because I had literally always avoided it. And then when I started, especially with Microsoft, it was all about experimentation. All of a sudden, I was told, try things in 3 different ways. And if they all don't work, then we'll just try something else. But that was really, really hard for me because I felt that those 3 different ways, if they didn't work, then I had done something wrong. And so what really helped me was the realization that everybody fails. Every successful person had to overcome failure at some point. Let me repeat that. Every successful person in this world is where they are because they overcame failure at some point. There are actually many companies, we'll talk about a few examples in a few minutes, that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for failure. Let me give you a couple of examples when we talk about people. You probably all know Stephenie Meyer, right? She's the author of the Twilight series. It was a big thing a couple of years ago. But I think you all know what I'm talking about, right? So when she wrote her first book, she sent her draft to 15 agencies. And those 15 agencies, 14 of them just sent her back a very nice letter thanking her for the draft and telling her that they weren't interested in her draft. And it took her 15 times. The 15th agency finally saw the potential in her draft. And right, we all know how that story ended. Oprah Winfrey is another great example, right? When Oprah Winfrey, when she started her career, she actually was kind of like, she worked at a little news TV station, a local one in Baltimore. And she worked at the TV station only for 7 months. Why? Because after 7 months, she got fired because they didn't think she was good enough. Walt Disney, another great example. He was actually fired from a newspaper in Missouri where he worked when he was young. And do you know why? Because they said he wasn't creative enough. So just think about that. Walt Disney, right? I mean, who has brought us all those great characters that we all grew up with. And there are a lot of examples like those, right? Every single person, I want to repeat that, every single successful person is where they are today because they have failed at some point in their career. And more often, not just once. So success is something that we all want, right? That we all are after. And the thing is, those stories that I just shared with you, right? They feel like exceptions. And the reason why they feel like exceptions is simply because we don't talk about them. Because what we talk about are about our successes. For example, my career. Let's take it as an example, right? You see this here, how my career looks on LinkedIn. And I talked about my career earlier. It looks great. Career highlight, one after the other. It's steadily going up all the way from kind of like graduating university, becoming product marketing manager, joining Microsoft Corporation, becoming director for Microsoft Teams, and then becoming a COO. But do you know how my career actually looked like? Like this. My career has been a mix of ups and downs, right? For example, before I joined Microsoft, I worked at an event agency, a special events agency. And I realized at some point that it wasn't the right environment for me. And I decided to look for another job. And I can remember when I wrote my first application, right? I was sitting in front of my laptop, just like right now, and I had drafted this beautiful cover letter. And I was thinking, oh, I will find a new job in no time. I mean, I finished high school with really, really great grades, and I'm a smart person. I will find a job in no time. Well, 3 months later, and 50 applications later, I was still sitting in front of my laptop writing applications. I had received one rejection after another. And do you know how long it took me to find that job? Not 15 times like for Stephenie Meyer, literally 51 applications because I had a list. I'm a very organized and structured person. I tracked all my applications. And number 51 was Microsoft. But that's the thing, you only need that one yes. And I learned something from all the other applications. And that's why when I then had the interview with Microsoft, I was ready. And I was ready to really kind of like nail it. And then when I joined Microsoft, I actually at the beginning, I joined with a temporary contract. So I had a contract that only lasted for 2 years. The problem was there weren't really a lot of non-temporary contracts. And then finally, I can remember I had 2 months left until my temporary contract was about to run out. Finally, one of those rare positions opened up. And I was thinking, well, this is my chance. Of course, I've been waiting for this for 2 years. This is perfect timing. They know me. They will definitely hire me into this job. So I applied. And then a week later, I had a one-on-one with my manager, who I also, of course, he was the one responsible for that position. And I can remember we sat together at a round table in a conference room. He sat across from me at the table. And I was thinking, great, he will now tell me that I have gotten this position. I was feeling really, really confident. And then he looked at me and he said, "Anne, I'm sorry, we gave the position to someone else." And I was devastated. Right? I only had 2 months left on my contract. And I had no idea what I would do. And so I asked my manager, right, what other options do I have? And that's when he actually started smiling and he said, "There's another position that will open up in 2 weeks and you should apply for it again." And I did, and this time I got the position. But this is how it looks for everyone. But what makes the difference is how do you deal with those doubts? How do you deal with those moments of rejection and failure? Because if you can be resilient in those moments of failure and embrace them as a learning opportunity, that's how you actually come out atop on the other side. And as I said, what really helped me was realizing that every person fails. And that is really, really important that you all, because I'm sure you have faced moments of failure in your career, and you will face moments of failure in your future career. And what is really important is to find a way how to deal with those moments of failure, because failure is simply part of the journey. What really helps me to actually, well, I would say deal with those moments of failure, because I mentioned that earlier, I still don't like to fail. I'm not the person who likes failing. I still, when I fail, like everything inside of me kind of like pulls itself together and I just feel terrible. But what works me, right, to get out of that situation, to think clearly again, is first of all, I give myself time to process those feelings. I know now how it feels to fail. It happens to me all the time. So what I do when I really struggle, I just put my running shoes on and I go for a run. That is for me the best way how to clear my head, put my favorite music on, and then, right, I come out as a different person from that run. What also helps me, and this sounds so, so simple, but what helps me is to meet with a friend or with a mentor for a coffee chat. And why is that so important to share your feelings and to share your moments of failure with someone else? It's actually very simple, because when you talk to someone, in order to talk to them and in order to explain to them what has happened, you need to structure the thoughts in your mind already. You need to actually reflect on the situation. And that means when you do that, you are already halfway there. And then you can pair that with that kind of like, right, that reflection with the advice that you're getting from that other person, with their experience. And for me, that really helps me to move forward in these situations. And I'm sure you all have your own way how to deal with failure, but it's really important to know how and what do you do in those situations. Well, there's another thing that I know, because in your career, you will not just have moments of failure, But also organizations have moments of failure, right? This principle that we saw earlier of fail fast, fail often, that is not just crucial for individuals, but the same principle also applies to organizations, to companies, and even more so today with the rise of AI. Think about it, right? Companies, just like people, they hit roadblocks. And when you, as a company, when you hit a roadblock, some of them, they reinvent themselves and they can come out stronger on the other side. And others, they stand still and they disappear. So let's take a look together at what we can learn from both of these scenarios. So let me ask another question and feel free to kind of like put your answers in the chat. Can you think of any company that was successful at some point and then failed to adapt and then maybe even disappeared completely? So I said, feel free to put your answers in the chat window. I'm sure that some of you have this company in mind. And I've put this one into the chat, Kodak, right? Kodak is a prime example of a company that was extremely successful, but failed to adapt. Let's go back in history for a minute. Going back to the 1990s, this time, I was 8 years old. And in the 1990s, right, Kodak wasn't just a successful company. Kodak was the company when it came to photography. Kodak actually had a 90% market share in film sales and 85% in cameras. So they were completely dominating the market. And the brand Kodak was literally synonymous with photography. So when people thought about photography, they thought about Kodak, right? And many of you will remember everybody had a camera. We're, of course, talking analog cameras here right now, right? And what you had to do, you had those little well, not so little cameras, but you had those cameras and you had to put a film in, like the one that you see here on the slide. And then you had to bring the film somewhere afterwards, after your vacation, to develop the film. And you can also probably remember, it was always that big moment when you picked up your photos because you had no idea how many pictures would be blurry, how many would be black because someone just put a hand in front of the camera in the very last second, right? But that was kind of like part of the experience. It was part of the excitement. And Kodak, they actually really leveraged that. They had really good marketing and they didn't just sell film, but they really sold memories with their marketing. And the problem was now they were doing it so well that they actually couldn't imagine a world without film, without analog film. So what happened? And here now really comes the irony of the story, because Kodak actually invented the digital camera. They had a young engineer, his name was Steve Sasson, and he created the first prototype in 1975. And that was almost 20 years before digital film, digital photography went mainstream in 1975. Right? And so he presented his prototype to Kodak's leadership and said, this is the future. This is how we can be innovative. And he was really excited about his prototype. But what did they say? Well, they didn't believe in it. They said, yeah, that's kind of cute, but don't tell anyone. They, on the one hand, didn't see it as an innovation, but especially they didn't see it as an opportunity because for them it was a threat. Why? Because they were selling analog film. And for them, right, their thought was, if we cannot sell film anymore, how are we going to make money? And that film business, that was their cash cow. Well, let's now fast forward to the early 2000s, because that's when the digital revolution really happened, right? There were competitors like Sony and Canon, and they went full in on digital cameras, which in the end then led to cameras included in our smartphones, as we all know, right? And Kodak, they tried to catch up. They also started to build digital cameras at some point, but it was simply too late, right? The business model that they had wasn't designed for a world without film. And in 2012, Kodak, that once very market dominating company, they actually filed for bankruptcy. So what I find so interesting about this Kodak story is this story isn't just about technology. This story is actually about mindset, because they didn't lack innovation. They lacked the courage to reinvent. They were so focused on protecting the present, so focused on protecting their business that they had in that moment, that they simply couldn't imagine the future. And this is really the core of business resilience, the ability to let go of what worked yesterday to create space for what will work tomorrow. And now think about it. AI, artificial intelligence, that is our generation's digital camera moment. So the question now, of course, is, will companies, will leaders, will they embrace artificial intelligence, or will they protect their old business models until it's too late? So here are a few more examples. I won't go into detail. You can look them up online, but those are other companies that were really market leaders at some point, and then they failed and became insignificant. Blockbuster, right? You might also remember the store we would go to rent a DVD. They could have bought Netflix for $50 million at some point, but they didn't believe that there was a future in streaming, and they laughed at the idea. We all know what happened. Nokia, another company, right, that dominated really the mobile market for a long time. And their engineers, they really saw the smartphone wave coming as well. But the management, again, they didn't believe it would stick, so they didn't invest into it at the right moment. But now let's also look at a few positive examples, because, and that is really the message I want you to take away from today. Reinvention is possible. And these companies that you see here on the slide, these companies that are companies that have reinvented themselves, and they actually keep doing it right now with AI. Microsoft, right? Of course, my heart. I worked for Microsoft for over 15 years, and it's a great example because for years it was known for Windows and Office. Windows was literally the cash cow for Microsoft. And under Satya Nadella's leadership, Microsoft completely reinvented itself, right? He saw and he realized that Windows wouldn't be the cash cow in the future and that he needed to change the business model. And so they moved away from selling software licenses, first of all, to cloud services. You might remember back in the days, you would buy Windows every 3 years, right? They moved away from that business model. They moved away not from Windows, but they built other areas of the business out as well. And now they're actually one of the companies leading in the area of artificial intelligence. Netflix. They actually started just like Blockbuster. They started out as a store selling DVDs. They didn't start out with streaming. They started selling DVDs. But then they didn't just shift from DVDs to streaming, but they also reinvented themselves again after that, and they became a content creator. And we'll talk a little bit more about Netflix in a few minutes because they are also one of the companies that are really embracing AI right now. And they're doing it in a really very, very great way. So let's talk a little bit about the biggest reinvention driver that we have ever seen, because that is what artificial intelligence is. AI, and that is the really interesting thing about AI. AI isn't just another technology trend. It is the biggest reinvention engine we have ever seen. So you might now be thinking, well, what is different with AI in comparison to other inventions? What is so special about AI if you compare it with other technology changes? Well, first of all, the speed. the speed of disruption that we are seeing. Because the pace of adoption with AI is just mind-blowing. When you think about it, the PC revolution, that took decades until everyone had, right, really a PC on every single desk. Then the internet, that also took years. Cloud computing. We have been talking about cloud computing for 20 years now. And there are still companies that are just now deciding to move to the cloud. Now, when you look at AI, let's talk about ChatGPT, which I'm sure most of you are using, right? ChatGPT reached 100 million users in 2 months. Let me repeat that. ChatGPT reached 100 million users in just 2 months. And that just shows that businesses, they don't have the luxury of time anymore. Because that next Kodak moment, right, that might just happen in a few months and not in decades. So the pace is completely different with AI. In the past, yeah, companies had time to respond to a change. They often had years. But now they don't. They actually really need to act now. If your company isn't investing in AI, they are behind. That's as simple as it is right now. What is also different with AI is that AI is a general purpose technology. What does that mean? So AI doesn't just belong to one sector, but AI actually has an impact on all industries out there, right? Healthcare, finance, public services, education, arts, even professional sports, retail, travel, transportation, right? You name it. All industries are being impacted by AI. Every industry, and not just every industry, but in every industry, every function, every role is being reimagined right now. And now you pair that with the speed that we just talked about. So we're not just talking in 10 years, but right now. So the real question is really, it's not, or it's at least no longer, if AI will change your world. It is actually how will companies choose to engage with it? And whether you will shape that change or you will simply respond to it. So let me do another show of hands. How many of you have already used ChatGPT or another AI tool sometime this week? I don't need to see the responses, honestly, because I know you are all saying yes. Because just think about it. AI is already everywhere. When I think about my day, right, this morning, I woke up, I used Alexa to start the radio, AI. Then I read my emails. And I had, right, back in the days, I had to always delete all the spam I got overnight. I don't have to do that anymore. It's filtered out automatically. AI. Then this morning I had to update because we're building a house. And so I had to update my address with my bank. So I went online, I chatted with an AI agent, and they updated my address. AI again. Then I went shopping today. Yes, I also did that in the afternoon. I went shopping and my daughter, right, I mentioned Tori, she's 6 years old and she's growing very fast. So she needed new t-shirts. I didn't go shopping for myself. I went shopping for her. But I went to a store in the city in Bonn and I went to the self-checkout and I didn't have to scan the t-shirts. I just put them in the bin. Everything was scanned and recognized automatically and I just paid. AI again. Right? And of course, after this keynote, my husband is in London right now, my kids are sleeping, I will watch Netflix and I know that I need a new show and I know that Netflix will recommend me one based on my previous shows that I liked. And it will be a show that I like because they use AI for that. So AI is literally everywhere. And that is really the interesting thing about AI. Because what I just described to you, what I just described That is value. Value that we are getting out of AI today. It's not just automation, right? Because a lot of people talk about how you can use AI to automate processes and so on. Yes, absolutely. You can definitely use AI to automate things and make them more efficient. But what I just described is that you can get value out of AI. You can personalize an experience. You can use AI to create. And I am getting value out of AI every single day. And the use cases with AI, they are endless. And think about it. We are just getting started. So let's now take a look at two companies that have been embracing AI, because I always find it helpful to look at companies that are really like trailblazers that show us what can be done. And those companies that we'll be looking at right now, they are not just using AI, but they have been using AI to actually reinvent themselves. I talked about Netflix already, but let's take a closer look because Netflix is a very interesting company in that sense. They are embracing AI on all sides, on all fronts. And by doing that, they are actually reinventing themselves. And they are creating, and that is the important thing, they're creating real business value. So when Netflix started in 1997, right, we talked about that already, they actually were focused on DVDs. So they would mail DVDs to your house. That's how they did it in the past, right? Really physical discs in red envelopes. And then they reinvented themselves by focusing on streaming. And they became a completely different company by pivoting to online streaming. And then, of course, the question for them was, so how do we keep people watching? And that's really where for them AI entered the story. Because Netflix built one of the most sophisticated recommendation engines in the world. So every time you watch a show on Netflix, every time you pause, or even when you hover over a show, that is all data. And that is all data that Netflix collects. And then AI, they use AI to analyze that data in real time to personalize your experience. And we all know data is what really fuels AI. And they have a lot of data. And the result is that 80% of people that watch on Netflix, what you watch on Netflix, 80% of the shows, they actually come from a recommendation that they are presenting to you based on the data that they have. But today, Netflix is taking it a step further, right? They're using AI across their entire value chain. They, for example, use AI to edit trailers to make sure that they appeal to different audiences. And they personalize even the artwork that you see on Netflix. They personalize that with AI. Let's, for example, say, right, you are opening Netflix and you see the show The Queen's Gambit, probably a great show if you haven't watched it. I can definitely recommend it. Right? Many of you have probably watched it. And when you open Netflix and then you see The Queen's Gambit, some of you will see an image of the main character. But others will see the same show, but being promoted with a chessboard or a love story theme. Simply because based on what you have selected in the past, Netflix knows what you are most likely to click on. And they use AI to create an image that matches that preference. That's simply how they tailor the experience to you. And that, of course, for them is business value because that's how they reduce churn, because they want you to binge a show. They want you to keep watching. Another great company to look at is Adobe. And Adobe is actually a very interesting example because Adobe could easily have been disrupted by AI. Just think about it, right? For decades, Adobe's products, Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere, they have been the gold standard for creative professionals. But now when you put generative AI tools into the picture, like DALL-E, Midjourney, and others that can create images and designs in seconds, then Adobe's business model, all of a sudden it looks vulnerable. Because why should you pay for a very expensive Photoshop license if I can just tell ChatGPT to remove the third weird person in my photo? And this was because of that, when all the generative tools came into the picture, really a moment of truth for Adobe. For them, this could easily have been their Kodak moment. But they didn't see AI as a threat. But they saw it as the next evolution of creativity. They saw it as an opportunity. And they realized that by using AI, it doesn't replace creativity. It can actually augment it. Because professionals, and that's what their target audience is, they still want control. They still want quality and trust. But they also, of course, want speed and inspiration. And so they did something really, really bold. They decided to build AI into their products and not around them. Let's look at an example, right? In 2023, they launched Firefly. That is Adobe's family of generative AI models. And it was directly integrated into Photoshop, Illustrator, and Express. So now you can go into those tools and you can type, for example, add sunset lighting, or remove background, or as you can see here on the screen, extend the background, extend my picture. And then AI does that instantly within Adobe's tools. But, and that's the big difference, with the professional tools, the creators already know and they already value. And so they didn't create a separate app, but they brought AI into those tools to enhance them. And by doing that, they actually protected their ecosystem. And they made their software, again, is the gold standard. And they made it indispensable again. So from all of these examples, when you think about the business value that AI can create, right, we can really bucket that into three main buckets. There's either efficiency, so you can use AI to do things faster, cheaper, and better. There's new revenue. You can use AI to create new products and services. Or then there's the bucket of strategy. You can use AI to build entirely new business models. And why is that so important for you to understand? Because as future leaders, this is how you want to think about it. Every AI conversation that you have within your company should map back to one of these three buckets. Because if AI doesn't create business value for your company, well, then it doesn't help you. Right? It's very, very important that when you adopt AI, that you always have in mind what is the business value that you want to create. So now, of course, many of you are probably thinking, so how do I get started as an organization if I'm not using AI yet? So there are a lot of AI adoption tools out there. I really recommend Google AI adoption tools. You will find a lot of great ones, right? We're still redefining or defining what actually the right ones are. And for every company, a different one might also work slightly different. But this is one that I have found really helpful. So in order to adopt AI, you first have to start with a problem and not with the technology. And that's exactly what I just talked about. What is the business challenge that you're trying to solve? Where can AI improve what you already do well? Or also, where might it help you to build something completely new? So really thinking through those use cases, thinking through them is super important, right? Because we have simply gotten to a point where almost all companies are jumping on the AI train, as I call it. But people sometimes think AI can do everything, but that's unfortunately not true. So you always need to keep in the back of your mind what AI can really do, right? For example, AI can automate pretty much everything that you could do within a second of thought. So as an example, right, AI can look at an email, that's what we just talked about earlier, and it can decide if it's spam or not. Or you can look at your phone and it can decide, does it have a crack or not, right? So you can use pictures of phones to actually do testing in production. Or AI can also look at a car next to you when you're driving, and it can decide, is there a car next to you or not? But there are also a lot of things AI cannot do. And that's very important because you cannot throw AI at every single problem and expect it to solve that problem. For example, right, today there are a lot of limits to what AI can do. Can it accurately predict the stock market? They actually just ran a test on that and had AI buy stock. No, AI did not do well. So that is not something AI can do. Or, for example, right, when you look at image recognition, when you have a person in an image holding up their hand, it is very difficult for AI to decide if that person is trying to stop you, the other car, or if they want to hitchhike, or if they're actually on a bike and they just want to turn, or they're talking to someone else across the street. Right? That's context that you have as a human, but AI cannot make those decisions. And that is the same, right? A lot of people say, oh, I will use AI to improve my sales. Yeah, but if you have a bad sales team, then AI won't completely change that. There's still other problems that you have to tackle first. And that's why it's so important to really focus on those use cases in your organizations. Then second, connect AI to your mission. Your AI strategy in your company should align with where your company is heading. Just how Adobe did it. AI is part of their mission now. Don't just follow the latest trend. You need to really embrace AI, and that means making it part of your mission. Then start small and learn fast. What has really worked for companies is to pick 2 or 3 use cases and just start with pilot projects. It doesn't have to be perfect. It won't be perfect. AI is developing so fast that when you start a project, at the end, there will be an advancement in the technology already. So you have to test, measure, iterate, fail, exactly what we talked about, right? So, but it's all about moving fast and get to doing things. And then, of course, also don't forget the human side. AI changes jobs. AI is already changing jobs. We all know that. So be upfront about that. You need a communication strategy. You need to help your team understand how AI will augment, improve their jobs, or how it will change them, right? Because bringing your employees along on that AI journey, that is extremely important. And then last but not least, data. You need to fix your data first. Data is one of the most important components for companies to think through. Why? Simply because data is the basis for AI. AI doesn't work without data. And AI is only as good as the data you feed it. So literally like the principle, garbage in, garbage out, right? So you need to think through the data that you have and that you want to use with your AI projects. So what we've seen today, and I hope what you have seen, is that the companies that get AI right, they aren't just buying an AI tool, but they are rethinking how they work. And with that, I would like to open it up for questions. And I would also love to hear from all of you who are working in a company right now. How is your organization adopting and embracing AI? What's working? What is not working for you?
Thank you very much, Anna. Yes, we do have many clapping hands around, I can see, and many comments in the chat that were related to your questions regarding companies that went through transformation. And also in Q&A, I see comments, but not real questions. So any questions you may have, now is the time.
Oh, Toys R Us is a good one that also failed. Yes. I'm just reading through the chat right now. Oh yeah, BlackBerry, of course.
Actually, I do have a question for you, Anna.
Yes.
It's like you've been in many very interesting companies, and also Microsoft, which is one of these companies that is in the middle of this transformation. I suspect that for any small company, this is a huge challenge, how to apply AI and this recipes you gave us, particularly the last few slides about connected with your mission, very quickly engage with the human component, which I think is crucial in artificial intelligence, by the way. I think is what is going to make the difference. It's going to be that how we embed the human component in it.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in a big company like Microsoft. Many of our students work for very large companies. How do you tackle artificial intelligence? It's like you start by letting departments analyze how to do it in each one of the departments where is necessary. As you said, it's like set up the problem, identify the problem, and then look for the solution using artificial intelligence. How do you suggest that big companies should tackle this issue? Departments, areas, strategy level, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting question because there is no definite answer to that question at this point, right? Companies are still figuring it out because the question is really, and that is what you just mentioned, where does responsibility lie for AI in a company? Who should actually own AI, right? And different companies have different setups. Some companies say, oh, clearly, this is technology. This has to be with the CIO, right? Or the CTO. And other companies, they focus more on the human side and they say it has to be the CHO. And other companies again say, oh, but we want to use it, first of all, to automate processes. So it has to lie with the COO, right? So there are different companies that have different answers to that question. What I have seen work best is, first of all, you need to have sponsorship from the top. So you need to have your CEO be bought into the AI transformation. If your CEO doesn't believe in AI, then the rest of the company will not follow. So that's very important. You need your board, you need your CEO to be the ones who push AI and really push it. This is not a bottom-up movement. This is a top-down movement. That's one thing. The second thing is really you need to have all of those roles at one table, right? You can decide that one of them is going to be kind of like the ringleader, the person who really kind of like leads AI in your organization, but you need to bring them all together because that is the interesting thing about AI as well. It touches all of those components. It touches operation, it touches technology, and it of course also touches the human side of things. It touches jobs, it touches jobs descriptions, and job positions. And skilling, of course, is another big topic that is then part of HR as well. And so you really need to bring people to the table together. But in my experience, you also really need the sponsorship and the push from the top.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We have already a few questions in the Q&A section. Let's go with this from Arnaldo Perez. We are right on time, but if you may take one or two questions, it will be fantastic,
Yeah,
Anne.
absolutely.
Arnaldo Perez, by the way, for you guys, the students, if you have any other commitments, of course, you are free to go. Those willing to continue a couple more minutes with Anne are very welcome. So Arnaldo Perez asks, Anne, what's the most effective approach to help teams adapt to artificial intelligence and make it a natural part of their work culture? Culture is a big issue in artificial intelligence as well. So thank you, Anne. Thank you, Arnaldo.
Yeah, culture is the big issue, right? Because it's difficult. Let's be honest, right? It's a big change. And people don't like change. We all know that, right? Most of us don't like change. When things are changing with AI, things change on a constant basis, on a daily basis. So I have found a couple of things really helpful that for example, Microsoft is doing that very well. First of all, again, is leadership. You need to lead by example. If you show your employees how you are using AI on a daily basis, why you're using it as a leader, and also the advantages that you're getting out of it, that really helps. And you as a leader, this is your job, right? You need to bring people along on the journey. You need to show them that's why that connecting it to your mission is so important. You need to show them this is not just a trend that we're following, but this is us as a company now. We are betting on AI. This is us. That's exactly what Microsoft did. That's what Netflix did. That is what Adobe is doing, right? They make AI part of their mission. And then, right, there's a big focus on skilling. You really need to help people get along on the AI journey. And what you need to focus on there, of course, that depends on the role. Different people need to learn different things. And you also, of course, need to take into consideration that some people will be more prone to learn and adapt to AI tools than others, right? Especially if you're an older kind of like population from an employee perspective, you might need to focus more on skilling. But so it's kind of like, right, it's not just one answer because there are multiple components that you need to focus on to really kind of like make sure that the entire organization embraces AI or can embrace AI.
Thank you, Anna. There's a question here from Jimena Ramos around the human touch. She asks, how can we integrate artificial intelligence without losing the human touch in the customer experience? I would add in any other part of the company, not only in the customer experience, because really, I think this is paramount. Thank you, Anna.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely in every single part of the company. But of course, customer experience is one where it's very kind of like where we all experience it, right? We kind of like, as said, I changed my address with the bank today, chatting with an AI agent. And I think, first of all, what we have gotten to a point in the last 3 years since ChatGPT has been launched, where we all, with an acceptance for AI tools has, of course, grown exponentially. And we all know that, right? I mean, when I chat with ChatGPT, I use it for professional purposes mostly, but a lot of people use ChatGPT as a friend to get feedback on their life situations, on life problems that they have, and so on. And they really use it that way because AI can bring that human touch to kind of like those experiences. And that's why I think that the acceptance is so high. But at the same time, right, that's the same with video conference. I don't think that AI agents or AI in general will ever replace the human touch, right? Like having one-on-one conversations or having direct conversations, how we're having right now, that is indispensable and you need to focus on and find the right balance. But there will be customers that will only engage with AI going forward. And it will be faster than waiting, kind of like in the right. Yesterday, I also called my telecommunication provider. And when I called, they said it's a 16-minute wait time. 16 minutes. You don't want to wait 16 minutes on the phone to talk to a customer representative. And that's where AI can really help to make that experience faster, because that is really the reality that a lot of those companies are facing that have call centers. They cannot hire enough staff because they don't have enough people that want to do those roles or that speak the languages that they need them to speak. And that's where AI can, of course, help with the customer experience. But as said, yes, I do think we need to have an eye on the human experience. And that's why, right, we could talk an hour longer than, I mean, the whole topic's about ethics and AI, right? That's a really, really big one that we didn't touch on today.
Thank you very much. There's maybe the last question that we can, so that we don't steal you so much time, sorry. The question is about, it's a question that it's in Spanish. I will translate it. Corporations are looking for how to include artificial intelligence in their culture, says Jabib Chavis. And he says also that this corporation wish to maintain privacy and also trying to reach a quick sprint into artificial intelligence without a lot of investment in it, like customization of the solutions, and without doing either like a tailor-made investment. So the question is how companies should address that way in a very effective way, like not really investing a ton of money in customization of those solutions.
You are touching on the big black box of AI, I would call it. That is the big challenge that all companies are facing right now and that all companies will face in the future. Because we don't really know at this point what AI tools will cost in the future. Right? When you look at OpenAI and so on, they're investing big money into data centers, into kind of like research and development and so on. But they are not writing black numbers right now for multiple reasons, right? I mean, ChatGPT, think about it. We all use it. There's a free version out there that gives you a lot of value. But at some point, tools will become more expensive because those companies need to see a return of investment. And which ones are the right tools to bet on, and which ones will be the cheaper ones, and which ones a company should choose, there is no clear answer to that at this point. Right? I personally think there are, of course, the big companies, the big players like Microsoft, like Google, Meta, right, that really invest heavily into AI. Those will be the ones that will consist and persist in that space. Definitely, smaller ones will probably also disappear at some point again. But which ones are really the most cost-efficient tools? You could probably write a whole doctor thesis about this already at this point, and in a half a year, the answer would be a different one. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer to that question because I don't think there is one today.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much also for devoting more time than we had in the schedule for today. It's been very interesting, your conversation, your topic of the dissertation, and also the way you address the question. So really very enlightening and very, 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 very interesting for our students and paramount for the future of the companies we work for. You see many praising comments in the chat and also in Q&A. So, Anna, thank you very much for your time and your generosity.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be with you here tonight. And I'm very much looking forward how you will all kind of like use AI in the future to really kind of like advance your companies.